So I am still in Banff. It's really awesome here, and I was just reading over some notes, and there's something that I thought was really interesting that I thought I'd share. It's a status quo bias, and it goes over 4 reasons why someone won't change their mind. So if you're talking to someone and you want to change their mind and they're just not changing their mind, even though you know what they think is the wrong way to go, it's there's 4 reasons why they won't change their mind, and they are. I'll explain each one in a little more detail because it sounds a little funny when I say it. It's the preference stability, selection difficulty, the cost of staying the same, the cost of change. Their focus is on the cost of change, not the cost of staying the same. And number 4 is anticipated regret. So the 4 reasons people won't change their mind. So when it's a status quo bias, they're dealing with a baseline of things the way that they are now, and changing them just being emotionally not a logical decision, but an emotional attachment to not changing the way that it is now. And the way that you have to change that problem is to destabilize the current state of affairs, right? So you have to point out a problem that they did not know that they had, and then show a cost of staying the same. So they see, you see opportunity when you present something to someone, and if they don't see it, it's because what they see when you explain it is a management project, right? And that's a status quo. It could be a status quo bias, unless you're actually wrong. But if you've worked this out and the math's working out, it's just the truth of what you're saying, is the truth, then that is the problem, right? They see as change management problem or project and not an opportunity. So you have to show a story that shows the cost of staying the same to get their attention off of the cost of change, right? The cost of change instead of the cost of staying the same. So you just have to reframe your idea so that it's showing a cost of staying the same. In other words, don't show the benefits like everyone says in sales. They say focus on the benefits than the features. This is saying don't focus on the benefits, focus on the bad part of staying the same, right? Not the benefits, but the cost of staying the same. So it was an interesting study, and it was, a question with multiple choice question with 2 answers, and it basically framed this question, the same question, 2 different ways. Would you rather keep 1/3 of your company or lose 2/3 of your company? Obviously, more people opted to keep 1/3 of their company versus lose 2/3 of their company. It's the way that you frame it as loss aversion. So selection difficulty is they can't see the difference until you show a clear contrasting comparison. So they have a problem making a choice. The selection difficulty is that they really can't see the difference between what they're doing now and what you're showing them. So you have to show them a clear contrasting comparison of what they're doing now and what it will look like after, right? So there's a clear line of story here. If you want to become a trusted advisor, you have to find what they didn't already know and point it out, like leaks and squeaks as a mechanic. You point out the leaks and squeaks. So they're 2 to 3 times more likely to act on loss aversion than they are to act on gain of opportunity. So what does that tell you when you think about sales training that says focus on the features and benefits? So if you're going to focus on the benefits, are you focusing on what they gain, or are you focusing on what they need to avoid losing? And then point out the leaks and squeaks. So there's a story that the Alcoholics Anonymous, when you go in there, you say, my name's Jason and I'm an alcoholic, and everyone stands up and says that. So there's something psychological about that. The reason that they do that is because the other people in the room, including you, you have a self-persuasion going on. It's a self-persuade. So I listen to the other alcoholics in the room say, my name's Fred and I'm an alcoholic, and all of a sudden I relate to that. He's telling a story, I'm like, well, okay, I might be one too. And then he goes through his story and he says, and then I, and now I. So you tell a story of loss, and then I, and now I. And so the 4 parts to the story here is you introduce an idea that was not previously considered. And now you're going to have this resistance to that, this change resistance. And then the next thing is you point out a flaw that in their current approach. You point out a flaw in your current approach. Your story points out a flaw in your current approach. So he can relate to you've introduced something that your story is like their story. And then you point out a flaw in your current approach. And then they see that flaw in their current approach. And then you point out a new safe alternative. A new safe alternative. So the new safe alternative, now you're changing their mind, and they're starting to think loss aversion. They're starting to think now in loss aversion. And now the last thing is a before-after hero story. So a before-after, a clear contrasting comparison on what they were before and their future state, right? So you want to show a visual, visceral contrast between the current state and a future state, a current state and a future state. So a visual, emotional, current state and future state, right? So people make decisions emotionally and then they justify them logically, right? I forget who says this, but your amygdala, I think it is, don't quote me on this, but I listen to people talk about neurology and I think it's fascinating. But we have a lizard brain, basically, and I think at the base of your brain back here is the amygdala, I think. And what basically it does is fight or flight, emotional response, instinct, and it's purely emotional. It's not logic at all, and it is animalistic, and you don't control it with your logic. It controls you, and then you use your logic to justify its choice. Think about that for a second. You're emotionally making decisions. I'm emotionally making decisions on a daily basis. You are emotionally making decisions on a daily basis. You're probably dealing with status quo bias. You probably justify your emotional decisions with logic. You just use your logic to justify those emotional decisions. You may change your own mind and work through the problem and sort things out and make real good advancements, right? Obviously, we do that. But a lot of the time when you're not working on doing that, what's happening there is not the best choice for you to make. So, that's just something to think about. Self-persuasion. You want your person that you're talking to, if you want to change someone's mind, you need them to self-persuade by telling them a story of, similar to their story, a story that has loss. You introduce the unconsidered loss, and then the flaw in the current approach, and then the new safe alternative, and then a before-after hero story. Hope that helps.